Thank you very much indeed, Mike and brethren. It is absolutely wonderful and overwhelming to see so many of you here. Currently, we're on 203 participants, which is fantastic. As Mike just alluded to, I am your Provincial Communications Officer. And as I normally like to do at this point during an audience with, just a quick reminder, really, if you've got any wonderful stories going on in your lodge, any fundraising activities, any brethren that are doing incredible things that you need to celebrate, get in touch with me, and I'm very easy to track down. You'll find me in the Square News, my email address there, every single week. And let's move on to the main reason why you're all here this evening. Brethren, tonight we have the honour of welcoming our Deputy Provincial Grand Master, Stephen Wyer. Stephen was born in Wiltshire, but raised in Kidderminster, where he attended the local King Charles I Grammar School. He's worked as a solicitor for the last 30 years, maybe a little bit over, first in the City of London, then locally, specialising in corporate and commercial law. Stephen was initiated into his old school lodge, Old Carolian, by his late father in 1988, who also installed him as the 40th Master of the lodge in 1997. A truly wonderful experience, as you can imagine. To say Stephen has achieved much in his Masonic career is probably the understatement of the century. And of course, in 2017, he was appointed as our Deputy Provincial Grand Master. In his spare time, Stephen loves walking, like we all do nowadays, trivia quizzes, and most importantly, spending time with his wife, Helen, and their 3 grown-up children. Brethren, I'm delighted to say our audience with this evening is in the hands of Stephen Wyer.
Thank you very much indeed, Brodie, and good evening, brethren. Bear with me, right. Good evening, brethren. It's good to see so many of you on screen this evening, and I hope that when I've finished, you'll feel that our hour together will have been time well spent. Why, I wonder, is the audience for this presentation so high? For one fleeting moment, I flattered myself that my reputation for erudite and slick performance had preceded me, and that the name Wyer alone had been the draw. But of course, that is patent nonsense. The reason you're all here in such numbers is firstly that this topic is important, and secondly, we all care deeply about it. Because if we all love our Freemasonry, then we all have an interest in its future, and in particular, the future progress of Freemasonry in our own province of Worcestershire. There has never been a more important time to plan for the future than now. Many of you will be familiar with the changes that have been taking place in Freemasonry over the last 25 years, and will know that we are already battling a falling membership and ageing demographic, as well as other changes in society, the pace of our lives, pressure on our time, the expectations of spouses and partners, and the rise of the digital age. It's trite to say that we need to ensure that Freemasonry remains enjoyable, relevant, and a force for good in society. But if we want to make that happen, then we can't just carry on as we were and hope for the best. We need to plan. The COVID-19 pandemic has been a terrible game changer and poses an existential threat to the craft. But in the words of one of my contemporaries, we need to see this as an opportunity to build back better, with objectives which are specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timed. United Grand Lodge, to their credit, recognised the need to foster effective planning some time ago, and they have mandated all provinces to produce a 5-year strategic plan. Our own executive have laboured long and hard to produce a plan which covers every aspect of the workings of the province, and it's that plan that I'm going to be sharing with you this evening. I should, of course, say that the plan is a living, working document. It was actually born before the pandemic came along, and has therefore had to be revised quite substantially from the document which first saw the light of day 2 years ago. Because it's a working document, it does mean that it's continually being refined and altered. And if after this presentation anyone does have any particular ideas which they would like to contribute, then I would be very, very pleased to hear from them. So what does the plan cover? Well, as you'll see, it deals with succession, governance, membership, Festival 2022 and charity, meeting places and heritage, learning and development and mentoring, and communications. That's internal and external. Where does it start? Well, with that most essential topic of succession. Province is a multifaceted organisation with various individuals, the vast majority of them, of course, volunteers, exercising various administrative and ceremonial functions. It's important that the province has appropriate deputies in position to cover these various roles should circumstances require. We've traditionally had deputies and assistants in ceremonial roles like Director of Ceremonies for many years, but we now have de facto deputies in most of our administrative roles who work alongside our post holders or who are at least shadowing their roles. This is not a very sexy topic, but practically it's important and will hopefully assure a smooth transition when changes need to be made. Responsibility for this area lies with the Provincial Grand Master, as of course most of those roles are in his gift. The next topic is governance. Again, not very sexy, but we need a province that's well run and therefore functions effectively. We now have an established structure chart, detailing all the various roles and responsibilities within our team and clear reporting lines. Our intention is that we share that with you soon so that individual responsibility and, more importantly, accountability is clear. First port of call for general queries will still be the provincial office, but direct communication with the person directly responsible for the matter in hand is often quicker and more efficient and will help to relieve the burden on our hard-working provincial secretary, he tells me. It's important that we as a province and an executive have eyes and ears around the province. With over 100 lodges, we can't obviously be everywhere. We are, of course, unique in ensuring that a ruler visits each lodge once per annum at installation, and we have no plans to discontinue this practice, which we all feel is enormously beneficial to the executive, as well as, we hope, our lodges. Certainly many of our brethren speak very proudly to others outside the province of this tradition. However, we also need to know what's happening at regular lodge meetings in terms of standards of ritual, mentoring, attendance, social and charitable activities, etc. And it's our system of provincial reps which enables us to collect a better picture of the general health of our lodges and to offer assistance where it may be required. We've introduced a more experienced team of provincial reps now who are able to produce accurate and relevant reports and who in the main are based locally to the lodges they visit and importantly know their members. I am responsible for this area of our work, and I also deal with any disciplinary matters, which thankfully we don't have too many of here in Worcestershire, as well as taking forward the changes to the governance of the Worcestershire Masonic Charity Organisation, more of which later. That's all very well, you may say, but it's no good having a well-run and a well-governed province if we're losing members hand over fist. Well, we're not quite in that position, but clearly the pandemic has not helped, as by the time it ends, it will have put an effective stop to initiations for at least 18 months. Let me give you some figures. Over the 5 years to the end of 2019, we experienced a net loss of 212 members. That is 8% of the total 2015 membership, or approximately 1.6% per annum. To give you a comparison, the average rate of decline in English provinces is between 1% and 3%. So we're not far off the average for UGLE. The numbers aren't terrible, but signal a gradual but steady decline. Our aim, of course, is to reverse that. The pandemic has forced us to temper our ambitions, but our target is to arrest that decline and to start to see net gains in membership by 2026. So, how are we going to do it? In a number of ways. Firstly, by continuing to roll out the Pathway initiative, and in particular, encouraging all lodges to plan their own future recruitment strategy. What kind of lodge do the members want? What kind of people do they know? Is it a special interest lodge? Does it have a link to the locality? All these things need to be thought about and to form part of the discussion. By raising the profile of lodge membership officers, secondly, and providing assistance to them from our own provincial membership officer. Once the lodge has a strategy, it needs someone with energy to lead it. Who's the right person in your lodge for that job? Thirdly, by use of social media to raise the profile of Freemasonry locally and the encouragement of special interest lodges where appropriate. Here, the province can help by generating a general buzz and by signposting potential candidates to the lodge, which will be right for them. Our aim is to fit square pegs into square holes, and our provincial membership officer is always happy to assist with this. Next, by support of the Cubic Club and new and young Masons generally. This is where the work of lodge mentors, supported by our provincial mentor, Worship Brother Chris Overall, is so important to ensure that newer members feel comfortable, are willing to tackle and understand the ritual, have the right expectations of Freemasonry, and are helped to get the most from it. If young Masons are enjoying their Masonry, then they are more likely to bring in their peers, the more experienced Masons who may have already exhausted their circle of acquaintances. Next, by engaging with our local communities and being visible in our support of local good causes, by doing, not just giving. More of that later. Next, by personally contacting all resigners and building a picture of reasons for resignation, so that even if it's too late to prevent that resignation, there are lessons we can learn for future. Next, by identifying and supporting smaller or failing lodges to either close, amalgamate, or take positive steps to move forward. I call this dealing with zombie lodges. What do I mean by that? I mean lodges which mostly, though not exclusively, have a small aging membership which is content to drift onwards with the membership happy in each other's company, but really just becoming a glorified dining club, and which will die as its membership ages and dies. It may be that the members are perfectly happy to continue on this basis, and we will continue to visit them and to support them whilst we can, but they do not and cannot represent the future. Now, none of the above measures will solve the problem entirely, but if implemented together and delivered with energy and enthusiasm, they may go some way to reversing the tide. Recent figures do provide us with some encouragement. In 2019, we had only a very modest fall in members, and the first 2 months of 2020 were very busy with initiations. Indeed, all other things like deaths and resignations being equal, we are relatively confident that we would have enjoyed a modest net gain in membership last year. That, of course, was not to be, and we suffered a further loss of 80 members net, reflecting the fact that there were no further initiations for the remaining 10 months of the year. This is the reason that we've pushed our targeted net recruitment out to the end of our current 5-year plan. We do have a strong list of candidates in the pipeline, but it will take some time, clearly, to bring them in and to build back our numbers. Now, Michael Dykes, and in relation to failing lodges, John Crowther, have responsibility for this area of work, most important. As far as our charitable giving is concerned, our primary focus for the next 18 months, of course, has to be the 2022 festival, and in particular our target of raising £2,022,000 for the MCF. We've taken the decision not to amend this target, but the pandemic has robbed us of 12 months of fundraising activity, certainly in terms of big events. Having raised £1.3 million at present, we have a major job to do to raise the remaining £700,000 by the end of 2022. Patrick Firminger and his committee have been working hard to develop fundraising plans for the culmination of the appeal, and have already started a series of rolling presentations in which they're outlining their strategy for the next 18 months. I will therefore not repeat that here, but I do want to comment on what we're looking to do after the festival has ended. The executive has long felt that the Worcestershire Masonic Charity Organisation has long been in need of a more substantial endowment. For a province of our size, the cash endowment of our main charity is really rather small, and with investment returns, particularly for cash deposits, being relatively low over recent years, the income available for distribution doesn't enable WAMCO to make really meaningful donations or to develop longer lasting relationships with worthy local charities. We intend, therefore, to launch an appeal for WAMCO after the festival has ended to encourage regular giving to WAMCO and to build up such an endowment. Once we have that, it may enable us to support a matched funding scheme, which will allow us to match donations from individual lodges to local charities much more regularly than we do at present. At the same time, we plan to change the makeup of the WAMCO trustees to comply with Charity Commission best practice by making the majority of trustees brethren who are independent of the executive of the province. The strategic direction may still be provided by the province, but the implementation and the day-to-day decision-making will be made by those independent trustees on behalf of you, the membership. This model already works well in a number of other provinces. It's mandated, as I've said, by the Charity Commission, but we can nevertheless make a virtue out of that necessity. Lastly, so far as charity is concerned, community engagement forms a major part of our strategy moving forwards. The executive considered that it is not enough for us to go on merely putting our hands in our pockets and making charitable donations, worthy though that is. Masonry, if it is to appear relevant and inclusive, needs to be seen as a visible force for good, helping with vaccinations, delivering for food banks, and yes, continuing the already excellent work going on with schemes such as the Masonic Fishing Club for disadvantaged kids. Please look out for my piece on this topic in the Square News shortly, where I will be asking for your ideas as to the sort of projects you would like us to get involved with. This is a really important initiative. Our thanks to Worshipful Brother Les Leake for agreeing to lead my committee, and there will be plenty of opportunities for you to get involved. Thanks, brethren. It's just medicinal gin and tonic. I now intend to move on to talk about Masonic meeting places, our heritage assets. We all need somewhere to meet, but our accommodation varies enormously. Many of our building committees work incredibly hard to ensure that our buildings are kept shipshape and Bristol fashion, and our role as a province is really threefold. First, to ensure that there is a consistency of approach across all our halls and that all that best practice is shared appropriately. Second, to provide technical support through our hard-working Superintendent of Works. And third, to provide grants and loans to support development or refurbishment work at halls. In recent years, we've used our Heritage Fund, which has been boosted by a number of legacies recently, to support a number of our halls, including our newest hall at Stourbridge and major repairs to our largest hall at King's Heath, both of which we all, of course, look forward to visiting and supporting when they reopen after the pandemic. It's important to recognise that all halls are different and come in varying shapes and sizes. What is important, however, is the quality of the accommodation. Would I be happy to invite my wife or partner inside is usually the litmus test I use to determine whether a hall is up to the mark. Well-run and welcoming halls can also be a useful marketing tool, as the success of a number of them on Heritage Days when they welcomed many members of the public inside can testify. John Crowther leads on this aspect of our work at a provincial level. Our library and museum is, of course, one of the crown jewels in Worcestershire, and the trustees of the museum continue to work hard to preserve and protect this legacy for future generations. Thoughts are now also turning to how we can make the artefacts more accessible to the public by, for example, taking them on the road or loaning them out to other museums as the centrepiece of exhibitions about local history or even Freemasonry itself. Provincial Grand Master is leading on this element of our plan, and the museum and its trustees, I know, are benefiting enormously from his experience as the ruler tasked with responsibility for the United Grand Lodge Museum at Great Queen Street in London. It has perhaps become trite to say that if we all understand and have a greater appreciation of the philosophy and history of our order, then we will become better advocates for it. You all know that a good talk or lecture can make a lasting impression on brethren and can infuse and educate as well as entertain. We have a long history in this province of nurturing learning and development, and we were one of the first provinces to have a properly structured learning and development team with a regular programme of events. This tradition continues, with the Provincial Grant Stewards demonstration teams continuing their excellent work, the learning and development team holding regular events, and the rollout of UGLE's Solomon online resource proving very popular and enabling lodges to put on a wider variety of talks and demonstrations. We also, of course, have the annual lecture competition run by our provincial orator, Kerry Parks. As a province, we continue to believe that it's so important for all lodges to have at least one item of learning and development on the agenda for every lodge meeting, even if this is only a 5-minute talk or a discussion. This helps to keep newer brethren engaged, even if the ceremony is one which they cannot participate in. And older members may even learn something too. It's never too late. I lead on learning and development within the province. It's all very well coming up with a business plan, I hear you say, but that will be for nothing if we don't execute and above all communicate it well. Well, this evening is of course a great opportunity to start the process of internal communication, and I hope that it has proved useful to you, the brethren. Our communications team, led by Mike Dykes, has made huge strides in recent years in adapting to the ever-changing communications landscape. As well as launching the terrific Square News during lockdown for our own members, we've realised that if we want to be able to reach many of our target audience, whether it be prospective members or members of the public generally, we need to embrace social media and to become more proactive in our approach. Rather than simple pictures showing check presentations, we need to create our own stories. Individual members getting involved in their own communities and making a difference are good examples, because we're then able to make the point that this should be no surprise. It arises naturally because Freemasonry embodies those values and therefore attracts those kinds of individuals to its ranks. We need to show the world that we're good people who make a terrific contribution to society, and we do it because we're Freemasons and not despite it. Brethren, in the time available, I've only been able to give you a flavour of the sorts of issues which the Provincial Executive grapple with on a month-by-month basis. And there will, I am sure, be many points which I've not mentioned, or with even some points with which some members will take issue. I hope, nevertheless, that I've managed to at least start the conversation. They say the darkest hour comes before the dawn, and I'm absolutely convinced that as far as Freemasonry is concerned, the dawn is coming. There has therefore never been a better time to plan for the future, not just for the immediate aftermath of the pandemic, but for the development of our province generally over the coming years. Hoping for the best is not a strategy. Like any commercial organisation, we need to set ourselves measurable objectives, know what we need to do to achieve them, how to achieve them, and by when. If we want to see a happy, thriving, growing and successful province that we enjoy, but that is also relevant to the wider community, then we aren't going to achieve that by sitting around and feeling sorry for ourselves. My final message to you all is that every lodge needs to have its own 5-year plan. What sort of lodge are you? What sort of members and visitors do you want to attract? How do you plan to achieve those goals? We need energy, enthusiasm, and above all, optimism. Let's all get cracking and look to rebuild after arguably the most damaging period in the history of Freemasonry. Good luck with it, and the province, I assure you, will support you in any way we possibly can. Let's show the best of us, because the best of us is very good indeed. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you very much indeed, Stephen. That was very informative. I think we walked away learning a lot. So, brethren, would you please show your appreciation with a silent round of applause? Thank you, brethren. But we're not done with Stephen yet. We've got some questions to put to him. So thank you very much indeed to those of you who put those questions to us. So, Stephen, you mentioned succession, and here's an interesting one for you. Is there a succession list for rulers?
The answer to that question, Brodie, is yes. And I defer to the Provincial Grand Master, who's somewhere there on my screen.
You're looking to an answer from me to that question, aren't you, Stephen? I guess you probably are. Well, I think it doesn't need too much explaining, I'm sure, brethren, other than to say that when the appropriate time comes, my successor will be a decision taken by the High Rulers of the United Grand Lodge of England, as is always the case. So that is a question that none of us around this table need to worry about too much. And the succession plan within the province does fall to me. It is always a subject of a shared discussion and a constructive discussion too. And so far, we've had no problems at all in that regard. And I'm sure that'll continue to be the case. So keep your fingers crossed, brethren. May come your way.
Thank you very much indeed, sir. Stephen, the province has a 5-year plan that you've alluded to, as you've discussed. When and what would trigger the province to sit down and reevaluate its goals or timeframes?
Well, the answer to that, Brodie, is that we're doing that all the time. As I said, we intend to formally review the plan at least every 12 months, but effectively at every quarterly rulers meeting, we have the plan as one of the items on the agenda, and we're continually looking at what we've achieved, evaluating what's worked and what hasn't, and feeding that back into the plan. And as anybody who's run their own business or been involved in any sort of business organisation knows, that's really how business planning, and in this case, provincial strategic planning, works.
Lots of questions coming in now, Stephen, as we suspected. How do you feel about the strength of masonry in Worcester after we return post-pandemic? Are lodges or some lodges going to survive this?
That's a very good question. I think that certainly initially things are going to be quite difficult, I think, because it's going to get some time for us to get back into the rhythm of provincial life, as it were. We've got to make sure, of course, we've been trying to make sure that all those who are initiates who have been waiting so patiently to come into lodges have been kept interested and informed. We've had several Zoom sessions with prospective members, I hope and believe that all those lodges with prospective initiates in the pipeline have been keeping them interested and engaged. And I think that it can't be denied that the first 12 months is going to be difficult. It's going to take some time to get ourselves back up to speed. And inevitably, of course, we've lost a number of members over this last period. And I think that it's inevitably, and I'm being perfectly honest here, there will be a number of perhaps elderly brethren who will be evaluating whether they really need their Freemasonry going forward. We've got to make sure that Freemasonry is seen to be of value to them and something that's worth paying to be a member of.
Do you see any long-term changes to ceremonies given COVID restrictions, and bearing in mind that those restrictions could be around a little bit longer?
That's an interesting question. I'm not directly involved, and I wasn't directly involved, of course, with the changes that UGLE approved to the ritual to deal with the pandemic. My own personal view, and this is a personal view, is I was not in favour of those. I didn't feel it was appropriate. I would much rather wait to give candidates, particularly initiates, I'm particularly talking about initiation, a proper ceremony. When I say a proper ceremony, I mean a ceremony without social distancing. But that's a personal view. It is a difficult issue because we don't want to keep people waiting forever to come in, and we have to find some way, as I say, of trying to make our rituals work with whatever restrictions may be enforced for however long they may be enforced. And those are very difficult questions to know the answer to at the moment, and I don't know the answer to those any better than anybody else, really. And I think UGLE are grappling with that at the moment. It's something that they, I think, will probably look to evaluate once we have more of a roadmap from the government as to how restrictions are going to be operating over the next 12 months or so, and then they can start to plan for how Freemasonry and the return of our lodges fit into that. So I think we probably need to wait until that exercise is a bit further down the track before we start to plan for how we in Worcestershire are going to be dealing with our own ritual and ceremonial.
Thank you, Stephen. Lots of questions to get through. Brethren, we will spend another 10 minutes or so, I think, on the questions. Here's another interesting one that often comes up, especially sat around a festive board. Do you think there is a future for the festive board? Do you think for installations only?
Well, certainly, I think there is a place, of course, for a festive board at every meeting. The question is, what sort of festive board, in my view? Because I think a festive board where we gather socially, either before or after a meeting, to talk about the meeting itself and just to engage with our fellow brethren, of course, is very important. The question of whether we need a 3 or 4 course meal with wines at every lodge meeting is very much a question for individual lodges, I think. There are a number of, particularly some of the newer lodges in Worcestershire that have only a buffet, for example, at lodge meetings and a full banquet at installation meetings. There are some lodges that have a meal before the meeting or a buffet before the meeting to allow brethren who perhaps working to be able to get to the meeting itself later on. So there are all kinds of issues like that we need to grapple with. But there are some lodges, of course, fine dining lodges, etc., whose raison d'etre is to meet and have a banquet and a meal. So I think it's very much down to the individual lodge, as I say, as to what individual lodge members think, what they want. We have to factor cost into it as well, of course, because the festive, the costs of 3 courses plus wine at every meal is something that we all need to bear in mind. All those issues we need to be thinking about. But my own view is that certainly don't think we need, and I've been an advocate of this in my own lodge, we don't need 3 courses plus wine at every lodge meeting, no.
Do we not need wider coverage than that put forward by each lodge to get our good works noticed by the wider populace?
Well, I think I could almost bounce that back to you, Brady, couldn't I, as head of our communications, really?
Well, I think we've got it's not about me, obviously, here this evening, but yes, I think we've all got a role to play, haven't we? Province has a role to play to celebrate the great work that we're doing. And I think individual lodges, as I said at the beginning of this evening's audience, has a role to play as well. And if you have got anything wonderful to celebrate within your lodges, do get in touch with us, and we'll do our very best to tell not only those within the province, but of course those in the wider world as well.
Sorry for dropping you in there, Brady. Yes,
that's all right.
I'll just echo everything you said. I mean, obviously, if you've got a story and you want the wider world to know about it, let us know, and we'll do our very best to get it out there. We're here. The province is here to serve the membership. You're not here to serve us. We're here to serve you, and we'll do our best to help and support you. And that's just one great example of the way in which the province can support you as an individual lodge. If you've got an event that you want to publicise, let us know about it and we'll publicise it for you.
Absolutely. Are there any plans for prospective candidates to meet some of the rulers of the Worcestershire province? So that's an interesting point, isn't there? Are there any plans for that in the future?
Yeah, well, we've actually already done it. We had a Zoom meeting. The executive, I think all the executive were on the same screen with all of our prospective initiates, or at least 30, 35 of them anyway. And we had a really, really good discussion, really good talk. And they were all, to a man, still enthused and still looking forward to being able to join us.
I should have added to the question. There was a little bit at the end. The last meeting was excellent, it says here. Do you have a template or guidance for lodges to develop their own plans, their own 5-year plans?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the mentoring, the pathway actually has a list of questions that lodges should be asking themselves. That's already there in the pathway initiative. But if brethren feel that it would be helpful for us to produce a planning kit, if for want of a better word, then we can certainly look at doing that. Yeah, absolutely. Excellent. I hope that my talk has given you some sort of basic headings under which to work, really, as a lodge.
Certainly has, yeah. In 2026, or is 2026 not too far out to look at net again?
Is that too far out?
Yeah.
It may be.
Too far into the future?
It may be, but I think that's a strategic goal. We've got incremental goals, hopefully, get on the way there. But it may be that we can do it earlier than that. I hope we can.
And brethren, I thank you very much indeed for your questions. Our Provincial Grand Master will be delivering his final thoughts for this evening's audience with. So, one more question, but thank you very much indeed for those that have been submitted. All absolutely fantastic. What is the provincial view when we resume on those who have, what is the provincial view when we resume on those who have and those who have declined to have the COVID-19 vaccination?
What is the provincial view on that?
Yeah, for those who have had the vaccine and for those who perhaps don't want to have it.
Well, we will take our approach. We will take our approach from the government guidance. Whatever the government guidance is for mixing indoors, that's the approach. That's the guide that the UGLE will use, and we will in turn be guided by UGLE.
Brethren, that concludes the questions. Thank you very much indeed for those of you who have submitted your questions. We really appreciate it. It really enhances an audience with. So thank you very much indeed for doing that. Once again, Stephen, thank you for a fantastic audience with. And brethren, once again, would you please show your appreciation with a round of silent applause? Thank you so much, Stephen. As I just mentioned, brethren, thank you very much indeed for joining us here this evening. And final thoughts and final words from our Provincial Grandmaster.
Thank you, Brodie, very much. And thank you all, brethren, for supporting this look into the future of the province of Worcestershire. And looking at the screen, I've noticed a number of visitors from adjoining provinces, and I have to say they're extremely welcome. I hope they've enjoyed it as much as we locals have. They may even have learnt something from us, who knows. It really is very pleasing to see many of you here curious to know about the plan for Worcestershire for the next 5 years and beyond. So special thanks to Brodie and the comms team for this really wonderful series of audiences with. It's proving to be a great success. And a very special thanks to Stephen for an excellent presentation, which we all enjoyed very much indeed. And it's been very well put together, and I congratulate you all. As Stephen said, if it wasn't for the pandemic, you would have had this presentation sometime before, but inevitably it's had to be tweaked and refined because of the changing circumstances. The implementation of the plan will, of course, be a team effort. Each of the rulers, as Stephen said, has one or more areas of responsibility. And the rollout of the plan successfully will depend on even much more wide team than that. That involves every lodge and every member of every lodge. So I hope very much you've enjoyed the evening as much as I have. If you have, and if you'd like to show your appreciation to the presenter and to the comms team, perhaps a small donation to Festival 22 Appeal, either cleverly through the QR code or through the MCF website, you might feel inclined to do that. It's good to be with you, brethren. Thank you very much for joining us. I hope you've enjoyed it, as I say. Keep safe, keep warm tomorrow, importantly. And perhaps if you do have a glass to hand, you'd like to join me now in the traditional operation at this stage of remembering absent brethren. Thank you all. It's been good to see you, and we're looking forward to the next one in a few weeks' time. Back to you, Brodie.
Thank you very much indeed, sir. Stephen, thank you for a wonderful presentation. And brethren, a little bit of a teaser for you. We have some wonderful news to impart to you in the next few days or so about our next audience with. I can't say any more, or Mike Dykes will kill me, but I will tell you that it is exciting news, and we hope that you will be joining us for that audience with in the next few weeks. Until then, brethren, thank you for joining us. Until our next happy meeting, we shall see you all very, very soon.
Thank you.